I remember when Sir David Attenborough came to my studio and he goes, I mean, isn't it fantastic? I'm in the British Museum holding an object which is 3,500 years old. And I said, well, actually, that's a replica I produced only a week ago. My name's Mike Neilson. I'm the British Museum's replication specialist. There's one thing a curator hates is an empty plinth. Orange dot disease is what they call it in the museum. You go to a case only to see there's a label with the orange dot saying the object has been removed from display. It's always very disappointing. So a facsimile is a perfect substitute. So everything in this room is a replica, basically. My whole life is one big fake. You can see here a painting I made of a mummy portrait. And once I was happy with the coloration, I then made the true copy. This is the Myra head, which I sculpted by hand based on a cast. Cuneiform tablets. Got a bit glitter on it actually from my filing. It's actually from a mould which was taken from the original object and then has been painted to match. I made these for university students studying cuneiform script. You can actually read this as you can the original. So as a teaching aid, it's absolutely fantastic. I haven't got a clue what it says on it. These are photographs of my predecessors. In the early 19th century, the museum used to use Italian formators to produce casts, which used to go to art schools and other museums around the world. Gradually, the museum started to employ its own staff. It's only myself now, but I just crossed over with the last remaining cast makers. I'm very fortunate to have heard some fascinating tales and stories, hopefully pass it on to someone else. In the early stages of my career here, predominantly my work was moulding and casting. But as I've become more independent, I do tend to approach objects differently, and a lot of my work is reconstruction. At the moment, I'm working on the Oxus treasure armlet from the 5th to 4th century BC. The replica is going to Tajikistan for display in the museum there. And this is modelling wax, scaled up by about 3% to the original to allow for shrinkage in the casting process. And that would have been the case with the original. Any metal from liquid to solid state does undergo some shrinkage. What I'm trying to do is recreate those individual cells which would have probably had semi-precious stones in them. The wax warms up as I'm holding it, so I've got to be very careful to keep all the details sharp. As you can see here, these marks, it's so easy for that to be rounded off by the warmth of my fingers. So everything has got to be done over time and very, very carefully. This is a really exciting project for me because it's my favourite object in the museum, and I've always wanted to make a copy of this object. So it could be my swan song. I pride myself in saying that I make bespoke one-off copies of museum objects, but actually when it comes to Rosetta Stone, I think I've made about 30 copies. When a request appears, I sort of roll my eyes and think, here we go again. This is the Warren Cup, the naughty Warren Cup, which I replicated. A bit of voyeurism going on here. All the detail, all the tiny scratches and imperfections have been picked up by the mould and transferred over to the metal copy. So this is a true representation of that object. So true that it's used to substitute the original when it's travelling to various parts of the world and other institutions. So this is an object made by a predecessor of mine. The original is on display in the galleries. This is the Great Torc, or the Snettisham Torc. So this area is very interesting. This is damage on the original, but isn't it strange how it happens to be there, and when you go on the other side, it's also there. I wonder what could be happening there. I think that's what's happened, is that someone is being played with the bloody thing. Some bullshit, and it's very solid in its design and construction that will withstand handling. That's one of the major benefits of the facsimile or a replica. Had this been original, I'd have a Ferrari around my neck. This is a resin cast. One of my first pieces I produced for a museum in Vienna, who happened to have a head which they suspected belonged to a torso within the British Museum collection. A professor from Vienna brought over a cast they had made of their head to compare to the break edge, this being the break edge, of the British Museum object. And as you can see, it's a perfect fit. So they asked for a copy so that they could then attach their original head to the cast they made. Of course, people are scanning and rapid prototyping objects now. That's not what I'm into. It just does not float my boat. I'm into the traditional techniques, and I just love to recreate objects, often using techniques which the original craftsmen used. And this is a really good example. This is medieval ewer I've been reconstructing. You see, everything is really basic. I mean, this was an old postcard rack. I happened to be going for lunch and saw it being thrown away. I thought, oh, that's exactly what I need. There's a huge question of how the Asante Ewer was made in the medieval period, and I've been given the task to work that out. We know it's been made through a process of moulding and casting, but it has this handle attached to it, and any sticky out bits cause problems with moulding and casting. There's been a lot of experimentation, and this part here is actually going to be the interior of the jug itself. But with moulding and casting, everything is in reverse, and this physical object is actually going to be space, which is weird when you think about it. Basically, you're making nothing. Get your head around that one. I'm stepping back in time, really, to learn how the craftsman created these objects. This is a beeswax model I'd made. You can see how skillful the original craftsman was. You're talking about 500 BC here, and the observational skills of that craftsman were immense. They've not just made a round horn, it's ridged. They've taken their time to pick up the finer points with this nice twisted design. What do you think of my work so far? Rubbish! This job really gets to you. The wing of the armlet is even more intricate. So this is one I've made previously. The original is made of gold. My copy is going to be made of bronze, which is gold plated and colour matched. This material is left over from making the gladiator's helmet. So what I'm basically doing is just using the offcuts. And I'm just forming the shape by embedding the feathers into wax. Now it all becomes a bit fiddly, and that's the reason for using the wax, to retain the position of each of these slivers. Otherwise they'll just be floating about. So these slivers of metal need to be transferred into a plaster mould, which will allow me to solder them into position en masse. And then that is attached to the main body of the object itself. I often devise things only to find that it's a standard technique in jewellery. It's just been practical, really. The big part of my job is problem solving. So I've been here for 30 years now. Before that, I was a model maker and a taxidermist working for natural history museums. There's nothing more difficult to replicate than Mother Nature herself. There's my head of a woolly mammoth. The funny thing is, I wanted to put a patina on the surface, and I thought, well, I could just skim this tusk across the snow and it could catch the grass. And of course, because they were lightweight and made of fiberglass, it went skimming across the snow and I went with it. I had to pick myself up, take the tusk back up the stairs, back into the studio, close the door promptly behind me. It was highly embarrassing. This is a great photograph. I also did a lot of conservation work of natural history material, so I understand the principles of conservation. It's a mixture of skills, really, which enables me to do my job well here. My natural history work was really, really interesting, but this job is fantastic. It concentrates more on the human aspect of art and culture, really. This is something I tend to do when I'm on holidays. I'm not one for lying on the beach, as you can imagine. They're great memories, really. Friday night out on the town. It is essential that you have these skills, especially doing technical drawings, because it's a big help. I am a sort of artisan-y type. I can paint, I can sculpt, mould, cast, braze, fabricate, you name it, I'll have a good shot at doing it. Often to high success, really. I don't like to fail. So hell or high water, I'll get there in the end. There it is. If you ever have to do a soundtrack, you must use Debussy, because I'm a big, big fan of Debussy. I had to go at sculpting him and produce the mould and produce this cast. I'm quite pleased with it, but you can never just pinpoint the guy, really. As a creative person, you have to sort of pedal backwards when it comes to facsimile, because when you're working in museums, it's the original which is the important thing, and your work is absolutely secondary. It's all upside down, back to front, really. You might have pride, but you have to take care of that object. So I'm now comparing the replica with the original, just to make sure that the dimensions are correct and everything is in right position. It seems to be okay. You see some of the areas here on the original are missing, but the curator actually wants to make the perfect copy, so no missing areas at all, as was new, really. This object is absolutely stunning, and it is my favourite object in the museum, but it is very complex in design. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's going to take an awful lot to achieve it. It's a fantastic job, because not only is it artistic, it is also the history of the service and history of moulding and casting. It's a very, very ancient technique, and little's changed from when somebody first noticed their fingerprint was copied when they were making a pot or working with clay. Heaven knows where it all started from. I suppose the big question is, why are replicas made? You all heard of the saying, an object can only be in one place at one time. If you have a copy, you're enabling the public to see how that object looks across the world. There are handling desks, a tactile display, really, where they're not touching the original, but they're touching something very similar. And the replicas I produce are so accurate that even academics can study them. A facsimile makes the collection more accessible. It certainly broadens the scope for the object itself. If you want to see how I've made this, then have a look at my previous videos. It does terrible things to your moustache.